You're listening to the Basketball Lab podcast with your hosts Mark Shannon, Mark Clark, and Marco Corona. They'll discuss all the top news and stories from around the basketball world while giving their opinion and insight. Now, here are your hosts.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Basketball Lab podcast. I'm your host, Mark Shannon, and once again, I'm joined remotely, as always, 6 feet apart, from my co-host, Marco Corona.
What up? What up? What up?
What's going on?
Not much, nothing going on in the NBA, just a bunch of trades, blah, 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 Lowry, etc. Other than that, quiet day.
Right, exactly. We wanted to, I think our plan was to kind of talk a little NCAA basketball.
Yep.
But that kind of got thrown out the window with all these trade talks, trade rumors, all that stuff. You know what I mean? So
the Orlando Magic changed the
right?
game.
Literally, the Orlando Magic basically opened the floodgates. I mean, who would have thought that? Because, there were so many rumors about or reports about a lot of teams waiting on the Toronto Raptors to make the first move, right?
Yeah, to open the
Lowry,
floodgates. Yeah,
right, exactly. But it was the Orlando Magic who opened the floodgates.
Yeah, so right state, other city.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, and they opened the floodgates, but it wasn't like they opened the floodgates like massively with probably one of the biggest trades of the day. And it was kind of sort of unexpected in a sense. I mean, we obviously knew there was rumors out there about Vucevic being traded, but to the Chicago Bulls,
that's the part that caught me off guard.
Exactly. Like that's the part that caught me off guard too. I mean, you're talking about an all-star player, all-star caliber player. But that was the biggest trade, so in my opinion, of the day. But you have Vucevic and Al-Farouq Aminu going to the Chicago Bulls in exchange for Otto Porter, Wendell Carter Jr., a 2021 first-round draft pick, and a 2023 first-round draft pick. But I know, you being a Bulls fan and all, like in the Bulls, or used to be a Bulls fan, I guess, or
yeah.
What do you think about this trade from the Bulls' perspective in terms of what they're getting, and in terms of their chances of making a run in the playoffs this year?
I like it. I think, well, first of all, the one thing that I said to you on the chat, and I don't know if I actually hit send on that, maybe I said it in my head. I was like, finally, the Bulls are actually trying to be relevant again. The one thing I said to you, and I think that it can't be overstated, is I don't think this makes the Chicago Bulls instant top 4, top 3 team in the East or instant Larry O'B contenders, but it makes them, competitive. It makes them relevant. I think that you're really going to evaluate this trade next year. Once this team comes together, I think they're not done. They're going to make some moves in the offseason. But finally, right? I mean, Zach LaVine is having the best year of his career, right? They have Kobe White. They have good pieces. They have the kid that they drafted this year, and they've added somebody. They've added a need. And I'll be honest with you, the one part that I thought was going to happen and they didn't move Markkanen. And that is a very interesting move. Now, I don't know if they're going to coexist, because really they're almost sort of the same player. And maybe it's because teams were hesitant to pick up Markkanen based on his, health. He's been often injured. But those two, Vucevic, Kobe White, you have you have Kobe White and Zach LaVine. As I stumble through this, wow, I am actually very impressed. I'm very impressed in what the Chicago Bulls did, based on where the trajectory of this team is going, and you can see that they're trying to, get back in the right direction, be relevant, right? Not just the doormats of the Central. And the Orlando Magic, it's obvious they're trying to blow it up and start from scratch, right? It's Tank Nation, right? Funny how it started, right? The season started, the Orlando Magic were really hot, and now they're pretty much going to be a lottery team for the next few years. So if you're a Bulls fan, and I'm sort of, still a Bulls observer, I'm impressed. Again, I don't see them competing against Brooklyn or Philadelphia or anything like that, but they're going to be competitive, and that's all you ask, right? And then you can sort of, make some room and figure out what you have. And, you can't there's no such thing as having too many good players. And I think that they're on the right track. Good for them.
Yeah, I mean, and you're talking about you didn't just go out and add just a mid-level piece or a guy that isn't going to step into your starting lineup. You added an all-star caliber player who's having arguably one of the best seasons of his career. You know what I mean? He's
Correct.
averaging 24 and a half points a game,
Yeah.
almost 12 rebounds
He's a
per
good
game.
player.
Right? Exactly. He's improved his 3-point stroke as well this season. And he's also under contract. So you're talking about a guy, he's 30 years old, but he's under contract until 2023, right? So
Under control, right? That's the baseball term. He's under control.
Exactly. Right? For a team that you're talking about, the Chicago Bulls, who have a guy by the name of Zach LaVine, like you said, who's having another career year this year, right? He's under club control for the next 2 years at least. And then you've got, Thaddeus Young, a guy that's been around the league for a bit. He's under club control. You said you already mentioned it. Kobe White, Patrick Williams, the guy they just drafted this season, right? He stepped into that role, which has made kind of Lauri Markkanen a little bit expendable, I guess, but they never traded him.
Yeah.
He's got 1 year left on his deal. He's a free agent at the end of this year, or a restricted free agent, I believe, at the end of the year. But he's also having a good year this year.
If you look at his numbers, it's actually, forget the injuries. What if he was healthy?
Yeah, he's having
one of those guys. What if he was healthy?
Yeah, exactly. He's having a good year. So I love the trade for the Bulls. I think in the long run, it'll benefit them as well. We've always heard the knocks on Vucevic that he's not the elite. He's not an elite player. He's never going to get to that status. But
he's Gasol's son.
Exactly. Pairing him up with Zach LaVine, though, I mean, with Kobe White, and you've already got some pieces there. I'm liking the future of the Chicago Bulls and Tom Thibodeau there, right?
No, Tom Thibodeau is in New York. You're having flashbacks.
See, there I go. I keep thinking he's back there, but it's just I like
OKC's old coach, right?
Exactly, Billy Donovan.
That's it,
right? Billy Donovan. I like the way they're going, the trajectory that they're on. I think they're going to be a contending team, or at least a team that's going to make the playoffs and at least put up a fight in the playoffs in the next couple of years or so.
And the other thing that it does too, right? And I use the word relevant. What you want to do when you become a relevant team or make moves like this is you want to become a place where other players, other free agents in the next year or two, whatever class it is, say that team is on the up and up, right? Like, let's face it, like KD wasn't going to Chicago. Guys like that weren't going to Chicago because Chicago has been a doormat for years, right? They take one step forward and 3 steps back. But now if this team shows other potential free agents, whether it's this season or the following summer, whatever it is, that this team is on the way up. And let's face it, Chicago is a great city, right? You win in Chicago, you got it going on, right? Bears have left the chat. But you win in Chicago, like this team, they've had 6 NBA championships, yes, under Michael Jordan. And I get it, that era was special. But listen, it's time for this team to be in the forefront. This is not a small market. Like, let's not kid ourselves. This is not OKC. This is not, any other team like that. This is Chicago. Right? This is a big time city that needs to be on a prime time schedule eventually. And I think that that's going to be a big difference. So if the Bulls can sort of make some noise, even, whether it's a first round exit or whatever it is, but be competitive, be relevant, show other free agents to be that, hey, come to Chicago. We are building something here. That's going to make a difference. So this is why I'm saying that you're not really going to see the results of this trade until maybe a year or 2 from now, but they're on the right track. This is impressive. Good on them.
Yeah, before we keep on with the Orlando Magic, because we know they were one of the busiest teams in the NBA trade deadline today, but the Chicago Bulls, they ended up making a trade for Troy Brown and Mo Wagner for Daniel Gafford and Chandler Hudson, right? Yeah. But that was a minor deal in a sense. Nobody really reported on it, right? But then they flipped Mr. Mo Wagner to the Boston Celtics in exchange for big man center, tough as nails, Daniel Tice, right? So, I mean, you look at the Bulls, they've added some toughness with Daniel Tice. They've already got Patrick Williams at that center spot. Tice comes off the bench, right? There's a lot of talent on that team in terms of, like, physicality. You already added Vucevic, right? Like, they've got a lot of good, solid big men on their team.
Thank you. There's the word I was looking for.
Right.
Size.
Right. They've got a lot of size on that team in terms of up the center spot, the power forward position, the 4 and the 5. They're They're stacked in terms of the size and the physicality. We obviously know Vucevic isn't the greatest defender out there, and he's not gonna, right? He's not gonna.
And that's where the Tice move makes sense.
Exactly. You bring him in off the bench. You already got Patrick Williams, who's a good defender. He's looked good this season in terms of on defense. So I like the move from the Chicago Bulls side. It just adds on. It's just a complementary piece to what they did earlier on in the day.
Right. And sorry, and I know I keep harping on this point. The reason I say that this is a good move going forward and not necessarily going to see any results this year is because at the end of the day, the Chicago Bulls are still on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
Right. They're 19-23 or 19-24 as we speak, as we record this. So again, they made this move to make a push to the playoffs and get those young guys that they have in their roster some experience. Let them taste what it's like to get into a playoff race. Sort of reminds me of what Phoenix experienced last year going into the bubble, right? And it makes a difference, right? Shout out to your newly shipped jersey. We won't tell the folks what it went through, but anyways.
Right, exactly.
From sea to sea. Anyways.
Exactly.
So, but again, this is what reminds me of, like, prepping this team for something better going forward. But yeah, if I can just touch on, if you don't mind me pivoting 1 second.
No, yeah.
Talking about Tice.
I was going to ask you that question. As soon as you were done, I was going to be like, so, and I know where you're going with this. I was going to ask you about the Boston Celtics.
So we'll pivot to that. What the hell are they doing? I don't understand. And I didn't do the research, and I don't pretend to be an analytics guy and all that stuff, but I know that the Boston Celtics have some picks stacked in the back, right, in the back room and in the storage, in Danny Ainge's truck. This team is 2 games under 500 as we record today, or 3, or whatever the case is.
Yeah, 2 games.
Would you say they have at least 2 bona fide stars, right, in Brown and Tatum? Yeah. Right. You can say what you want about Marcus Smart, whatever it is. Tice, as much as I don't like the guy, and he's a good player. He's a good defender. He's tough as nails. Right. That's the guy. That's the kind of guy you want in a playoff series. And they flipped him.
Well,
Can you please explain that to me? If you have a good reason, I will be more than happy to listen because I don't understand it.
I don't. I mean, it's the same thing. It was funny because when that deal came out, I was watching The Jump. Right. I was watching Richard Jefferson, Robert Horry, Kendrick Perkins. They were all on and they were discussed. And that trade came about, and they basically said the Boston Celtics have traded Daniel Tice to the Chicago Bulls. And Robert Horry was like, huh?
You're probably like, for marketing maybe, or something?
No, they were like, what? And Perk was like, well, I got to see what the return was for.
Fair.
And then they said it, and he was like, I don't understand it. He's like, and I get it. I 100% agree with him in terms of that, because at the end of the day, the biggest need for the Boston Celtics and the biggest Achilles heel for them was down the middle. That center spot has been Achilles heel for them this season. Tristan Thompson hasn't lived up to what they expected from him coming into the thing. There was a lot of talk about him being bought out or traded, right? Obviously, now you can't trade him. I mean, don't get me wrong. Mo Wagner's not going to be able to step in and take over Tice's spot. You know what I mean? You've got Robert Williams and those guys back there, but there's still a lot of depth there. But you're talking about a hard-nosed, physical center that's going to grab you offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, and you just gave him away for basically nothing in a sense, right? And you don't have any other a piece that's coming in to replace him. You know what I mean? So I thought if anybody was going to be traded, I thought for sure Tristan Thompson would have been the guy moving. It's just weird to me. And we seen the report come out the other day that a lot of teams don't want to deal with Danny Ainge and the Boston Celtics because they pull out of trades, right? And
you're saying his pullout game is good? Is that what you're saying?
His pullout game's weak. He's pulling out on trades that he could make, and he's not doing. You know what I mean? Yeah. But no, it's right. No, there's no editing on that. It's
no, but screw it.
Right?
Screw
exactly.
It.
But screw no, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, you're talking about a team that, like you said, has 2 bona fide stars in their team in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Yes, they're struggling right now. Marcus Smart is not hitting shots. Kemba Walker is not playing the best basketball of his career.
He's been up and down.
Right, yeah, exactly. They've had an up and down season so far, and I mean, a lot of teams have had that, but you're talking about giving up Daniel Tice for basically nothing. Now you're going to ride it out for the rest of the year, or unless you can end up signing a Andre Drummond or something like that in the buyout market, which let's be real, they're not even in the game. I think he's going to LA, but we'll get into that at some other time. But you're talking about now you got to ride the rest of the season out with Tristan Thompson as your number one center.
And Robert Williams.
Williams, right? You got to.
And the first thing I was thinking of, they must really think highly of Williams.
Yeah.
Right. Which I know that every time for the most part, I've watched Celtic games or whatever the case is by accident, is, the guy's a big guy, but it's, and he's got size, but that's all I see. Like if you look at his stats, and I just pulled him up right now as we were talking, 7.7 points a game and 6.4 rebounds a game. Okay. That's a bench guy. Those are bench numbers.
Yeah.
Right. And again, always get stuck up on the numbers, et cetera, but the stats, the numbers don't lie in this particular case. There's literally no presence down the middle, unless, like you said, but it doesn't seem likely that they're in on the Drummond thing. So basically going shopping for a discount. If they can get Drummond, okay, maybe they solve that problem and everybody shifts down a slot. But until then, I have no idea what the Celtics are doing. The Celtics were supposed to be a top 4 team, top 3 in most cases, either being minimum in the East Finals with Brooklyn or whatever the case is, with Philly being right in the mix. And they're barely hanging on to the 8th seed, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they're 2 games under 500, barely hanging on to the 8th seed. Might be if the season were to end today, they'd be basically playing in a play-in game to get into the playoffs, more or less, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You're not talking about
very, very bizarre things going on in Boston. I can care less, but I think from a basketball perspective, it is very, very odd because this team is a talented team. And again, maybe I go back to what I said a few weeks ago. Is it time for a different voice? They're not going to make a coaching change now.
No.
Right? I mean, Brad Stevens, he had to, swipe away some rumors about him going back to college. And by the way, nobody's going back to college from the NBA. Like, let's not kid ourselves unless it's a sweet deal. But something's wrong in either the locker room, something wrong with the messaging. Yes, Kemba Walker has not, been what they thought he was going to be. But it is what it is. Right. Maybe that's why they got to maybe the next guy we can sort of lead into the trade the other trade that they made with the Orlando Magic. But I don't get it. I don't understand the needs that they require, and what they got makes to me no sense. But if it works out, then Danny Ainge looks like a genius. Right. So.
Yeah, and you specifically just mentioned that the Celtics did make another trade today. They made a trade with the Orlando Magic. They acquired Evan Fournier for 2 second-round picks. It's a good pickup. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, Evan Fournier's having a good career year, but it wasn't, like we just said, it wasn't the need that they needed. They didn't need another shooter. Yes, their shooting has struggled. They needed somebody that could hit the big shots or hit shots when they need it. 3-point shots, all that stuff. They're not getting that right now, the production from guys like Marcus Smart and Kemba Walker and stuff like that. But their biggest need was a center, and to fill that position and to get a bigger and better in that position, and they didn't do it. They went out and got an Evan Fournier who, yes, he'll help them. Man, totally help them, but he plays the small forward position.
Yeah, and again, this is not a knock on Fournier. I think he's a good player. I think he would have helped out a lot of teams. He could have helped out the Lakers. He could have helped out the Clippers. He could have helped out a lot of teams out there. But again, maybe Danny Ainge is looking at, again, the buyout market, right? Aldridge is going to be available, and we'll get into that maybe a little bit later. And Drummond and certain other guys are certainly going to be available. There's going to be a market out there.
Yeah.
But like, to me, it's this team, again, 2 games under 500 for a team that should be top 3. It's not acceptable. Period. End of story. If I'm a Celtics fan, I'm confused.
Yeah, I mean, it is weird. At the end of the day, it is weird. I mean, you're talking about Evan Fournier, who's great player, having a career year this season, but it's not like he's been an elite player his entire career. You know what I mean? Right. It's not something he's having a blip in the thing. And he was also playing with the Orlando Magic. It's not like he was playing with a top team where he was putting up points. He was playing with the Orlando Magic, who are one of the worst teams. So he's getting minutes. He's getting shit. He's getting stuff like that. You know what I mean? But he's over his
So
year.
you're saying somebody had to score, right?
Right.
In Orlando.
Exactly. Somebody had to score. The ball had to go through somebody, and those two were the guys that the ball was going through. Jonathan Isaac's not there. Markelle Fultz is hurt, right? They're dealing with a lot of things. Aaron Gordon wanted to get out. We'll get into him a little bit later. There's a lot of guys in there that weren't. And you had Terrence Ross, you had Evan Fournier, and Nikola Vucevic. Those were the three guys doing the heavy lifting for the Orlando Magic this season, right? And they traded away two of those guys.
Right. On the flip side, you can say that maybe this is why the trade will work out, because in Boston, Fournier won't be expected to be the heavy lifter. He can just sort of slide in and be one of the other guys, right? So there's always a flip side to something like this. But again, if you have a need, go get it. And listen, it's not like the Celtics are the Clippers where they have no assets and no picks to move. They have stuff to move. They just chose not to use them.
Yeah, and I'm lost for words in terms of I don't even know what to say what the Celtics are going to do or how they're going to get back into this playoff race.
They can. They have the talent. They should be.
Right, and adding in a guy like Fournier, who's had two consecutive really good years. We're not going to knock him on that. He's had 2 consecutive good years. He's had some injuries that he's dealt with and all that jazz. But is he the piece that's going to put them over the top? Probably not. It's not. I still think that if they are playing and they're healthy and they're playing the way they are, I still think they're probably the third or fourth best team in that division. Right? The Celtics. If they're playing their best and they're not dealing with injuries, COVID, any of that stuff, whatever, I still think with this roster, they're the third or fourth best team in that thing. I still think Philly's better than them. I still think Miami's better than them. And I still think that Brooklyn's obviously better than them, right? So that that's 3 guys right there. There's 4. I could probably say there's probably one other team that might be even better than them,
right? And then they haven't really hit their stride. Like they started off okay, and they just have not been able to just get on a roll, right? They're finding ways to lose, and that's tough too. Like we just saw it with the Toronto Raptors, like. You get into a bit of a funk. It's hard to get out of it. So
exactly.
Way too much talent. Way too much talent.
Exactly. And they were the Orlando Magic. Keeping on with them because they were obviously, like I said, they were the busiest team this trade deadline. Right? They completed one more trade. They sent Aaron Gordon to the Denver Nuggets for R.J. Hampton, Gary Harris, and a 2025 protected first-round draft pick, right? Well, we all know Aaron Gordon wasn't the same player that Aaron Gordon was when he came out of Arizona, right? When he first came out of NCAA, he was dominating at Arizona, right?
Yeah. And
he came out, he was playing well, he was dunking the ball, doing things, and you can just see, and maybe it was kind of like the Blake Griffin effect, right? It's just a change of scenery might be what Aaron Gordon needs. And in 100% honesty, I think this is a perfect fit for Aaron Gordon with the Denver Nuggets. I think it's the perfect fit. You're playing beside one of the best passing big men in the NBA in Nikola Jokic. Jamal Murray, while he's had his ups and downs this season, is a really good point guard, good in the pick and roll. Right, you have MPJ out there as well, Michael Porter Jr. They're a solid team. And the Denver Nuggets needed to make this trade. Right? You can't go into the playoffs expecting to beat the Clippers, beat the Lakers, beat the Jazz with the same team you went into the playoffs with last year and had to
great point.
Right? And had to battle back from 2-3-1 deficits to even get to that point, right? And we'll talk about it later but the Clippers, they had to make a move to kind of counteract that because again, the Clippers, they made a couple good pickups early on later in the offseason, but they weren't pieces that are good that we're going to get them over the top, right? So they needed to make a move, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Keep talking about the Magic and the Denver Nuggets here. But on the flip side of that trade, R.J. Hampton going the other way. He was a highly touted draft prospect prior to him going over to Australia to play, right?
Yeah.
He was highly coveted out of high school. A lot of NCAA colleges want him, and he chose to go the professional route, right? But what do you think about him going to Orlando and what this will do for his career, especially with their starting point guard, Markelle Fultz, out for the entire season?
That is a very interesting question because obviously the Orlando Magic, you know how there's quarterback, in the NFL, there's a quarterback competition, right? We'll figure it out during training camp and there's going to compete for your job. Or in baseball, you have a closer competition and starter. This is, I think, the same thing. And right now, unfortunately, I think Fultz is plan B. Not because he's not talented, because at this point, all we know about Fultz is he's a skilled guy, but he's injured a lot, right? Now, on the other side, you're getting a guy who is not going to be under pressure. You're going to come to a team that's literally rebuilding, right? And just he can grow with the rest of that team. This team got very young, very fast. I don't think they're done yet. I think that there's going to be another move coming, whether it's a buyout, maybe Terrence Ross gets bought out, or maybe not. Maybe that's an offseason move or whatever the case is. But I personally like it. I like it on both ends. I like it on both ends because Denver fills the needs. Like you said, and your point about not going into the playoffs with exactly the same script is bang on. That's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results, right? And again, not to digress from the Orlando side, but Denver now gets a guy who can sort of just slide in. He's a number 3 or maybe number 3B, right? I love this trade on both sides because Orlando is clearly on the rebuild. They get draft picks and they get a young piece that, like you said, highly touted, and they can work on that. And then they can figure out what faults. The great part about it is now you have a team that's rebuilding too much of the same thing. And now you have a strength. You can make moves from a position of strength instead of a position of weakness. So I like it. I think it makes a lot of sense. This is a very savvy basketball move by the Orlando Magic.
Well, exactly. And you look at the Orlando Magic, especially, I think it's, like you said, I think it's a good move for both sides because it fills needs that both teams had, right? And especially for Denver, a team that is competing for an NBA title with the team they have, with the guys they have, they're competing for an NBA title. So they need to make a move like this that's going to be able to maybe push them over the top, be able to put them into that upper echelon of the league or the Western Conference, because we all know the Western Conference is a tough conference. It's not an easy conference, right? And then you have with the Orlando Magic, right, you've got they drafted Cole Anthony, right? They have Cole Anthony who's playing well. Terrence Ross has been playing well this season. So that's their point guard, shooting guard combo. RJ Hampton would slide into probably the third spot right there right now because Michael Carter-Williams, Dwayne Bacon's there. But like I said, it's a spot for RJ Hampton to kind of grow into a role as a starter, and he'll be able to get starter minutes, be able to put up points, pass the ball, do what he needs to do without having the pressure of playing for a championship team while sitting on the bench, not playing as much, right?
Right, because Jamal Murray's not going anywhere.
Exactly. And then from the flip side of the Denver Nuggets, right, they've added pieces like Aaron Gordon to their roster, plus they added JaVale McGee as well, right?
JaVale McGee.
Right? And they just added depth to their roster. Now you've got Jamal Murray, Will Barton, Aaron Gordon, MPJ, and Nikola Jokic as your starting five, right? I like that starting five, especially for the fact there's a lot of length on that. We know Nikola Jokic has a little bit of a deficiency in the defensive end. He's a little bit slower. He's not as quick. We get it. Aaron Gordon is a good defender when he's out there. He's not a bad defender, right? Michael Porter Jr., he's had a rough go since coming to Denver, but he's starting to look like he's getting more comfortable out there.
He's hot and cold,
right? He's got size, he's got length, and then you got on the bench, you got Facundo Campazzo, you got Paul Millsap, right? Thank you, right? You got JaVale McGee, you've got Paul Millsap, but right, there's a lot of guys that are on that roster. There's a lot of depth on that roster. I like the way they're looking for the playoffs, especially how good, hot and cold they've been this season. I think that if they can get on a run, I think they're going to be a tough team to beat in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think with the Denver Nuggets, it's balance, right? They have a very balanced team. And it's funny you mentioned about length and, size. And to me, Denver has set themselves up for a matchup against hopefully the LA Lakers, right? Let's face it. You don't get this big for no reason. Like teams scout, teams will do things sometimes out of character, sometimes it backfires in order to position themselves in the events that you get up to a matchup with a certain team that they have a certain advantage that you can match up well. Does that mean that you're going to beat them? I don't know, but we saw what Denver did last year against the Lakers, right? They put up a fight, right? So buckle up. I like it. They have to get on a bit of a roll, though. Let's see them how they go into the playoffs, because sometimes the adjustment of new players takes a little bit of time, but let's see what they can do. Jamal Murray has to get healthy, and he has to be a little bit more consistent. With him this year, it has been more about health and consistency, which if you're not healthy, you can be consistent.
Yeah.
But I really like those moves. Denver's window is now. Mm-hmm. They know it. It's obvious. They have to take advantage of it while they can.
So jumping a little off script in terms of trades, because this team didn't make a trade today, but the Los Angeles Lakers, are you kind of surprised that they didn't make a move, knowing full well that they're dealing with possibly 4 to 6 weeks of no LeBron James? They've already been without Anthony Davis for about, 4 weeks already, possibly a little bit longer. It's going to be a struggle for them. But like I said, are you surprised that they didn't make a move? I know they were in on Kyle Lowry, but are you surprised they didn't make any sort of move so far?
Yes, I was. And it's funny you asked me that, because that's the first thing I thought about at 3:30. I'm like, the Lakers did not make a move. I also think that the Lakers are sitting back, waiting to see what happens in the next week or so. And I think they're going to go again shopping in the bargain basement aisle and see what they can get there. They're going to try to navigate as much as they can without LBJ and AD. They know they're going to make the playoffs. I think they're confident enough that when they get healthy, they don't need to be a top 3 or 4 team. It doesn't matter to them. I really don't think that it does matter to them, not without any fans or whatever the case is. But yeah, I mean, Lowry would have definitely helped, right? Other pieces would have definitely helped as well. Maybe another wing, another shooter. But they're going to write this out. They're probably going to go in the buyout market. I'll be more surprised if there's no moves in the buyout market, because again, this ankle injury for LBJ, yes, he's back in 4 to 6 weeks, but these things linger, right? And you want to be careful. You don't want to just, he's not going to come back, guns blazing, even though LeBron James is superhuman. So you have to be careful. They do have enough of a cushion in the Western Conference that they can sort of just navigate, be 500 or at least maybe a couple of games below. But yeah, maybe an addition. I don't know. I'm a little bit surprised that they did not make a move, period. Yeah, whether it was a low-key move or something high profile, but maybe the asking price was too much.
Yeah, and that's my thing on it. I think obviously Kyle Lowry, we being Raptor fans and knowing what Kyle Lowry brings to the fold and all that stuff, but you giving up, because we've heard what Shem Sharani said and a bunch of other people, that a deal was centered around Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Dennis Schroeder. Obviously, you have to make the salaries match to kind of make it work, but Toronto Raptors wanted Talon Horton-Tucker, right?
Yeah. Wouldn't you?
Right, exactly. And the Lakers weren't willing to give him up. You're talking about 20
They think very highly of him.
And you're talking about a 20-year-old kid who's come onto the scene, and and I think he's on an expiring deal. He's going to get some sort of a raise, I would expect, after the sort of season he's had. So I can understand why the Lakers didn't want to give him up for Kyle Lowry,
a rental,
knowing full well, like I've said before, and I said before, and you said before, Kyle Lowry's a rental player. At the end of the day, he is technically a rental player. You don't 100% know you're going to be able to entice Kyle Lowry to come back and play for you in next season, right? He's got the ability to go wherever he wants to go,
including back home.
Right, exactly. Whether it's Philly or coming back to Toronto, I've heard a lot of people say like, just the makeup of the Toronto Raptors roster, he just doesn't fit and all this stuff.
Lies.
And I'm like, I don't understand how you could say that, right? In the sense of like, Kyle Lowry is, he's 35 years old, or he just had his birthday, whatever, however old he is.
Happy birthday, Kyle.
Right, exactly. Happy birthday, Kyle. Good thing you didn't get traded. So Masai gave you a nice birthday present. You get to stay with the Toronto Tampa Raptors. Yeah. But you're not talking about a guy that doesn't have the ability to still play.
Correct.
Right? And
lead.
Right. Exactly. And I heard, I think it was Richard Jefferson. I can't even remember, but
who?
Richard. Yeah. Right. Richard Jefferson on The Jump. I think he said today, he compared Kyle Lowry to a Ferrari with 300,000 kilometers on it. And it's like, dude, are you kidding me? Like, yes, he's been around the league for a while. He's been with the Raptors for a long time, but he's still out there giving his all. It doesn't matter what it is. He's still giving his all. The Raptors were in the midst of a 9-game losing streak, and Kyle Lowry was still out there giving his all. You know, the disrespect that some of these analysts gives to Kyle Lowry. But, obviously, I mean, you know what? We're talking about Toronto Raptors. We'll just keep sticking on to that. The Toronto Raptors were looking to trade Kyle Lowry. Obviously, being Raptor fans, like I just said, Kyle Lowry has done a lot for the Toronto Raptors, done a lot for this franchise. Were you surprised that they didn't trade him, though? Like, obviously, there was rumblings prior to the deadline that they weren't going to trade him, that he had said that he wants to retire as a Raptor and all this stuff. Were you surprised they didn't actually pull the trigger and make a trade for Kyle Lowry?
Man, we've gone back and forth on this, right? And I think that every time you ask me this question, I give you a different answer. It's never been the same, right? And it's funny. Inconsistent, right? And I was going to say to you, maybe we should pull up the old recordings to see what I said 2, 3, 4 weeks ago about this particular situation. As you know, by the hour, I had, yes, they're going to trade him. No, and I was convinced today that he was gone. We even heard up to like around noon that what was the quote, that the Sixers were on the 1 yard line.
Yes.
Right. So I don't know if I'm surprised that the Raptors didn't trade him. I'm surprised that the teams involved didn't pull the trigger to get him. Right. So this is more about perhaps what Masai and Bobby and this organization thinks of Kyle, and what the other team values their other pieces going the other way, right? Now, sometimes we were talking about Danny Ainge. Sometimes you overvalue what you have. Sometimes you can overvalue draft picks. Sometimes you can overvalue what you actually think that you have. Philadelphia didn't think that trading for Kyle Lowry and giving up the pieces that they were potentially going to give up, and you can maybe fill in our viewers or our listeners on what that was going to be, was worth a 35 or 35-year-old point guard that is probably going to walk away at the end of the year. And I think that's the biggest challenge here, that you're taking a risk, the unknown of going for it. But if you don't get the chip, then it's like, well, we went for it and we didn't get anything out of this. So I'm on the fence. I didn't answer your question. I pulled a presidential answer by answering without answering. So yeah, I guess I'm a little bit surprised, but depends on what the deal was, I guess. I don't know.
Well, it's surprising because it's pretty funny that you brought that up about, the Raptors valuing Kyle and the other teams not valuing or overvaluing their players, so to speak, because Richard Jefferson and Kendrick Perkins had this little argument or this little fight on the Jump today, where they were where Richard Jefferson was saying that sort of, and this is where I said to you earlier about disrespecting Kyle, where he was disrespecting Kyle a little bit, but he kind of elaborated on it later. He basically said that these other teams, not that they didn't value Kyle and what he was, they weren't willing to give away pieces that they value, like Horton Tucker for the Lakers, like Tyler Hero for the Miami Heat, or
Thybulle, right?
Right. I think it was, Matisse Thybulle from Philadelphia, right? They weren't willing to give up these pieces for Kyle Lowry, who, like you said, could walk at the end of the year. There's no guarantee he's going to come back and play for you. So you're giving up these guys to chase a championship. You don't win. Kyle Lowry leaves, it's all for naught. You know what I mean? It was kind of like the Raptors trade for Kawhi Leonard when they traded DeMar DeRozan for.
Wait. I'm going to stop you right there. The only difference is that Masai had the balls to do it.
No.
Right? And I think that's where the overvalue comes in.
Yeah.
Right? Because let's face it, anybody who's a Toronto Raptors fan over the last years, 6, 7, whatever it is, love DeMar DeRozan. Loved him. And this organization was attached to the hip to DeMar DeRozan. Masai knew that. And Masai knew that when he ripped the Band-Aid, he was going to take the brunt of it.
Yeah.
But he was willing to go all in and risk the fact that, and we all knew that there was a very high chance that Kawhi was going to walk regardless. But he still got the chip out of it.
Yeah.
So the risk reward was worth it.
Yeah.
These teams were now, this is where GMs and presidents and whatnot have to make a decision, right? If I go all in, I'm going all in and this is it.
Yeah.
This is exactly what the Raptors did. The Raptors took a massive chance and traded a guy who's beloved and a franchise player and et cetera, for a game changer. Right. But they believed that this move was going to work one way or another. And if it didn't, they're going to die by the sword. I was going to say the Eagles. The Sixers were not willing to do that because they believe that the players they have, can take him to the next level.
Yeah. And I think that was with all the teams. I think it was with Miami and with the 76ers and with the Lakers. I think that they weren't pulling. I think Masai Ujiri was playing poker with them. He was putting his chips all in and saying, here, this is what we're giving you. But the only way to do it is if you call what we're given. You know what I mean? Right? They weren't giving them the option of just saying, hey, you know what? If you're gonna give us, we're gonna give us Tyrese Maxey a couple first round picks. All right, you know what? We'll take it if we don't get the offer we want. They were sticking to their guns. They were sticking to, we want this guy in the deal, and if we don't get this guy, we're more than likely not making the deal. We're okay with letting him stay and taking our chance with maybe possibly re-signing him in the summertime or in the offseason or letting him walk for nothing, right? Kyle Lowry I've said it before, Kyle Lowry doesn't owe anything to the Toronto Raptors. Right, he doesn't owe coming back to the Toronto Raptors. He doesn't owe the fans any of that. Right, he's won a championship. He's put in blood, sweat, and tears for the last 10 years with the Toronto Raptors.
He took 3 charges in an All-Star game.
Right, exactly. He took 3 charges in an All-Star game for the Toronto Raptors, and so he's earned the right to sort of
call his shot. Really,
right, exactly. Call his shot and what he wants to do. And Masai Ujiri wasn't going to just say, you know what, yeah, he's a free agent at the end of the year. I understand why these teams aren't making the deal. So we're just going to take whatever we can get. Right? You don't want to take whatever you can get. And you look at the Laker deal where supposedly it was centered around Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Dennis Schroeder, and they didn't want to give Talon Horton-Tucker. Dennis Schroeder's a free agent at the end of the year. So it's not like Toronto was getting Dennis Schroeder for 3 years.
Right.
They were getting him for a year where he could walk at the end of the year as well, like Kyle Lowry.
Yeah.
So you were interchanging that. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has played well with the Lakers. There's no questioning that he got himself the bag with a $40 million deal.
Right.
But he's not an all-world beater. He's not a guy that's going to just, flip the switch and the Raptors are going to be a contending team. Right. Moving on to off of Kyle Lowry a little bit, the Toronto Raptors made a couple more trades today where they traded away Terrence Davis and they traded away Matt Thomas, right? For a couple.
Who? Matt Thomas. Right. Can I tell you something? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. Yesterday, the Raptors won as we record this and whatever. They beat the Denver Nuggets. Yeah. Right.
Smoked them.
Yeah. And I saw Matt Thomas on the floor and I'm like, I forgot Matt Thomas was still on the team. Matt Thomas has not worked out.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Matt Thomas has a lot of deficiencies in his game. And I know there's a lot of fans that love Matt Thomas. Play Matt Thomas, this and that. But Matt Thomas didn't give you a lot. If he wasn't hitting shots, he was, his ass was pinned to the bench. And his defense was subpar, right? Now, what did it cost the Raptors to get Matt Thomas? What did the Raptors get out of Matt Thomas in this trade?
Second round pick, I believe.
Win.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
There you go. That's all I have to say about Matt Thomas.
Right. And Terrence Davis, same thing. Another guy that was undrafted, a guy that they didn't, obviously he's dealing with his own legal issues, and that aside,
Yeah.
right. That aside, the Raptors were able to turn that into picks, right. Or a pick. Right. So, but at that point, they traded away Kyle Lowry. I mean, they traded away Terrence Davis. They traded away Matt Thomas. It was like, okay, well, now there's 2 open spots. So what are the Raptors planning? Right. Sorry, there was 3 open spots because they had made another trade prior to that. Right. But that was, what are they planning? And then they didn't make the trade for Kyle Lowry. So now they've got 2 open spots that they could fill with whatever it is, right? Whoever's out there, 10-day contracts or on the buyout market, right? There's a guy, LaMarcus Aldridge is out there. Andre Drummond's out there. Not
happening.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some buyout options that could be out there in the near future, but I guess we'll see in terms of that. But shifting gears to the other trade they made, Norman Powell. Right? They ended up trading Norman Powell to the Portland Trail Blazers for Rodney Hood, Gary Trent Jr., and I believe
his dad was a Raptor.
Right. It's funny you mentioned that, because they obviously, these things happen and the people go into like a tizzy and they're like looking up stats and looking up all these things. So Gary Trent, I think it was his 3rd NBA season. Gary Trent, the father, the senior, 3rd NBA season, playing with the Portland Trail Blazers, 41 games into the NBA, into his career, or 41 games of the season, traded to Toronto Raptors. Gary Trent Jr., 3rd NBA season, playing with the Portland Trail Blazers, 41 games into their season, traded to Toronto Raptors.
I see what you did there.
I mean,
okay,
it's, right? It's, right? It's kind of like it's weird, like how things come to fruition in terms of that. You know what I mean? You have the father was traded like literally the exact same time from the exact same team at that point in his career. But moving on to the actual trade and stuff that matters now, Norman Powell has he's had an up and down time with the Toronto Raptors. He's had his good days, he's had his bad days, he's had his really bad days, and he's had his really good days.
Phenomenal.
Right? This season, he's due a contract. You knew he was going to get he was going to get paid probably over $15 million a season, right? Yeah, he was going to expect a lot more money. He's having close to 20 points per game, right? So the Raptors knew they had to move him, right? They're struggling. They're nine games below. They were lost 9 games straight. They had to move him. What they ended up getting, though, I think was the key piece into it, and how they were able to parlay Gary Trent and Rodney Hood. So I want to get your take on that deal and what it means, what it could mean for the Raptors going forward.
I love this trade. I really do. I think it's one of those basketball, and I usually, when I mean by basketball trade, I'm not talking about, like people usually look at stats. It's like, oh, look at Gary Trent's numbers versus Norm Powell's numbers. Don't forget it. Just look at the actual basketball trade itself. Rodney Hood may or may not be a Raptor for long. So just put that aside for 1 second. By the way, he's a Raptor killer. So I'm glad that we actually got a guy who's actually killed us in the past on our team, by the way. Just, on the record there. I like this move. I think that Gary Trent is going to be Norm Powell 2.0. I'm telling you right now, he's got a lot of potential. And here's the genius part of it. He's only, 22, if I'm not mistaken? 22 years old, 23? This guy's a 22. Young guy. Yeah. 22, right? Okay, there you go. So they're going to have time to negotiate a contract extension or whatever the case is. This is a great deal. He's going to get opportunity to play here. He's going to get some minutes. This guy's he can ball, man. I'm telling you right now, forget the numbers. Don't look at it, because if you look at it, it's going to be a mismatch. Norm Powell was having a
career year.
He outperformed his contract this year. There's no doubt about it. And there was no way, the way that Norm Powell was playing, that you were going to be able to keep him and sign him without breaking the bank. There's no way. So to me, this makes absolute sense. The numbers make sense. There's room for a lot of room for cap reassignment here with this particular Gary Trent deal. So this is why I'm talking about the basketball sense, because it makes sense fills a need, and it doesn't necessarily put you over the top with regards to the cap space. And this to me, and I said this on the chat, this to me smells like a Bobby Webster deal. If you look at the numbers financially, you look at the basketball player and the potential and the trajectory, this makes a lot of sense. And I'm telling you right now, 2 years from now, you're going to look at this deal and be like, wow, what a steal. Love it. Well done. And again, people have to realize you're never going to get equal value for a guy that's outperforming his contract. It doesn't make any sense. You're never going to trade a Norm Powell for a Norm Powell. Otherwise, you don't make the deal. You can trade a Norm Powell for a guy who you think is going to be a Norm Powell 2 or 3 years down the road, which is, I think this is what they got. But this, to me, this is why it makes sense, man. This is a smart basketball deal. Under the radar, trust me, good deal.
So, yeah, and I agree with you. I think it is a really good deal. They're adding a 22-year-old guy who's on my fantasy.
By the way, sorry to interrupt. I didn't even talk about Rodney Hood. Rodney Hood can play.
Yeah, he can.
Rodney Hood is a good player, man. So look out.
Yeah, like I said, they added a guy that is a talented player. He's young. He's on my fantasy team, but
there it is. You see that?
I was kind of just dropping that in a little bit. I was going to continue on, but I wanted to see if you'd catch it, right? But yeah, you're adding a 22-year-old who's on a rookie deal. He's only making $2.1 million on his cap hold right now, and they have the opportunity to use that $20+ million to re-sign him, to give him an extension, to pay him some money, right? We knew Norm Powell wasn't going to come back. I don't think he was going to come back, and I don't think the Toronto Raptors were going to give him the money that he wanted. For what he wanted, I should say, in terms of the salary that he's going to command.
He's going to get paid. He's going to cash in.
Exactly. He's definitely going to cash in, and he should. I mean, he's had a good season this year.
Good for him.
Right. I've had my beefs with him in terms of like his up and down play and inconsistencies, but we've called him playoff Powell for a reason. That dunk in Game 4, I believe in Game 4 was which series was that? I can't even remember
Pacers.
now. Right, the Pacers series was a huge bucket, right? A huge dunk. It was highlight to one of
off your seat kind of stuff.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly, off your seat kind of stuff. It's
but he had his limitations, though.
Exactly.
Right? Norm Powell was instant offense off the bench and instant offense this year off the starting lineup, right? But at the end of the day, Norm Powell was an average to below average defender.
Yes.
Right? Like, you give the ball to Norm, there's one thing he's going to do. He's going right to the basket. He's a jump shooter. If he's hot, he's hot. And if he's cold, he's cold.
Yeah.
And this year, he's been more hot than not, right? But there was limitations to his game. So that's what made him inconsistent going up to this last 2 years, where he's been like last year, he had a heck of a year as well before he got injured, if people forget that, right? So he's been on the up trajectory. So you can see, okay, the better this guy plays, the more ching, right? So again, I look at it, what did it cost the Raptors to get Norm Powell? Gravis, Vasquez. You got the best out of Norm Powell, I'm telling you right now. Good deal.
And that's the thing. It was funny that you mentioned that too, because they were talking about that on the jump earlier today, where they
need to clearly call us, by the way.
Right, exactly. I know.
Rachel, make me a call.
I've dropped them 3 times on this, but no, they were talking about it in that sense, in terms of they were talking about that earlier as well. The same thing, where they had mentioned that. So Norman Powell he's done well, and I think all Raptor fans will thank us for it. We'll thank him for what he's done for the Raptors. He's won a championship. We wish him all the best in Portland, and hopefully he can secure that bag and get paid, and hopefully be able to keep up this consistent play for the Portland Trailblazers over there.
And it won't be long until Raptor fans see him Sunday night.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know about quarantine protocols and all that jazz, but I don't think there is anything since he's coming from Tampa, right? But
right. Yep.
We got 3 more trades to talk about before we end this podcast off. We got the Philadelphia 76ers. They were in on Kyle Lowry. We had talked about this, but instead they ended up going out and getting George Hill from the Oklahoma City Thunder in a 3-way deal, right? The Knicks were involved, and the Knicks, Thunder, and it was 76ers, right? So going to the New York Knicks, you got Terrence Ferguson. The Oklahoma City Thunder are receiving Austin Rivers, Tony Bradley, a 2025 and 2026 second-round pick that gives them 34 picks over the next 400 years. Right, right, literally. And then the Philadelphia 76ers are receiving George Hill and Canadian Iggy Brzdakis. Right?
Bless you again.
Right, exactly. It's a big trade for the 76ers because George Hill, we've seen it as Raptor fans. He's another Raptor killer. You know, when he was with the Pacers, he was an absolute Raptor killer out there, you know, and
Veteran, he's been around the block. Yeah.
Right, he's been around the block. Milwaukee, he was really good with the Milwaukee Bucks. So I think it's a solid addition for the Portland Trail. I'm still thinking about the Portland Trailblazers here.
Let it go, man. Let it go.
Right, exactly. For the Philadelphia 76ers, it was a good trade for them. I think it's a solid piece. They didn't get Kyle Lowry, but they ended up getting a player that's obviously not just as good, but who can bring defense, who can play offense, he can do a lot, and he adds depth to their roster.
And depth is relative because in the playoffs you don't go 12 deep, you never go 10 deep, you may go 7 if that. But George Hill brings it. He's been around the league. He can play. And again, I'm looking at the crystal ball, and this is, to me, is setting themselves up for a matchup versus a team like Brooklyn, right, or a team like who's the other team there in the East? Brooklyn. Well, Boston's clearly not it.
Miami.
Sorry, there you go. So you have to sort of think ahead and prepare yourselves. There's no such thing as too much depth, right? And George Hill, if he can stay healthy, he's had some injury issues over the last couple of years. This is, again, smart basketball move by the Philadelphia 76ers. They didn't get the guy they targeted, and it didn't cost them what they were being asked for, but they still got a quality player. And we'll see what happens in the playoffs. So this is what it's all about, right?
Right, and exactly. You just mentioned it. They're built. They have a shot at possibly making the NBA Finals this year. You have to get through Brooklyn. I think the Eastern Conference finalists, or the team that makes it to the NBA Finals will have to run through Brooklyn. I think that's inevitable. I don't think there's any questioning that with the pieces they've added, the pieces they have on their roster. So I don't think there's any questioning that. I think it's a good piece that they added. You add Ben Simmons, George Hill, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Matisse Thybulle, Tyrese Maxey. There's a lot of talent on that roster.
By the way, the team that we forgot is clearly Milwaukee. I don't know if that says a lot about Milwaukee or the fact that it's a Thursday and we're exhausted, but it is what it is. But so they're right in the mix between Milwaukee, Brooklyn, Philadelphia, and Miami. And Miami, again, they cannot be disrespected. This team started slow. They had COVID issues. Jimmy B was hurt, and with COVID and all that stuff, they're coming. They didn't trade the pieces that the Raptors wanted. They kept Duncan Robinson and Tyler Let Me Be Your Hero. So we'll see what's going to happen in the playoffs. This is fascinating. The top 4 teams and whatever it is behind it is going to be an interesting stretch. Coming down here now. We got the trade deadline and now the buyout market. So we'll see how everybody else positions themselves going into the playoffs. And don't forget, play in this year.
Exactly. And then you just mentioned them, the Miami Heat. They didn't end up with Kyle Lowry, but they ended up with the next best. I would say the next best, biggest piece that was still available on the market in Victor Oladipo. Yeah. Right. I don't know what the Houston Rockets are doing. They could have had They could have had Karis LeVert.
Yep.
Right. Nah. But instead they took Victor Oladipo. And it just doesn't make sense to me. They ended up with Kelly Olynyk, Avery Bradley, and I believe a first-round draft pick swap of some sort for this year, I believe. I think it's a good deal for the Miami Heat. It adds a piece to their roster that could help them in the playoffs. I think they needed an extra star type player, a player that could,
a guy that can score.
All right. You have Goran Dragic, you have now you have Victor Oladipo, you have Jimmy Butler, you have Bam Adebayo. There's a lot of players on that team. You have guys off the bench like Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero. There's some good talent on that team. I think they could make another deep run. They've been one of the hottest teams in the NBA over the last couple months. They've lost 4 straight, but they've been one of the hottest teams. Jimmy Butler's been playing absolutely exceptional over the last stretch of games here. So I think it's a great deal for them. I think it'll not push them over the top. Obviously, I think it'll be because, like you said, I think it's a 4-team race in terms of the top 4. I think it's between Milwaukee, Miami, Brooklyn, and the 76ers. I think it's a 4-team race to who makes it out of the Eastern Conference and into that NBA Finals.
Right.
And I think on the Miami Heat's part, I think they needed to make a move. We saw it in the playoffs against
it makes sense for them.
Right?
Yeah.
We saw it in the
I don't think it's a needle. It doesn't move the needle, but I think it's something that makes sense for them because and we talked about this even last year during the bubble. The one thing that the Miami Heat struggle with is they go through spurts that they can't score.
Yes.
They can defend the heck out of a team, but they don't score. Now, can Oladipo bring that if he can stay healthy? Because he's averaging 22 points a game or whatever it is. Listen, in that Miami Heat system, in that offense, with the coaching that they have and the style, I think it can work. I think it can work if he can stay consistent and healthy. But again, it's all about matchups in the NBA, right? So we'll have to see. And he knows the Eastern Conference, being in the Pacers organization for a few years. So it's not going to be that massive adjustment for him.
Well, yeah, and it's also, but is he going to gel in that system, right? You got to go into Miami, it's not tough to play in Miami. There's only certain players that could play in Miami that are tough players that could deal with the scrutiny, deal with the pressure of playing under Eric Spoelstra, playing under Pat Riley,
right?
Playing with a guy like Jimmy Butler who expects
a grind,
right? It's a grind out there, right? So it's going to be different to see. He's kind of called himself a little soft. Sometimes he's called it himself that. Prior to that
ain't going to work,
right? That's not going to work in Miami. He's going to have to change the way he plays, but it's not a needle mover. But I think it's a piece that they need, that they missed in the playoffs, especially against the Lakers.
Correct.
Right? You can't rely on Jimmy Butler to do it all because if, like you said, they go into spurts. If Duncan Robinson isn't hitting, Tyler Hero isn't hitting, Goran Dragic isn't playing well, then you're only stuck with Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler. Now you got Victor Oladipo, you got Bam Adebayo, and you have Jimmy Butler, right? So there's three talented players. Could be a mini big three, I guess you could say, a mini big three out there. But I think it's a good trade for the Miami Heat. I think they didn't have to give up a lot for it to give up Kelly Olynyk and Avery Bradley. Avery Bradley is a great defender. Love Avery Bradley.
It didn't really work out though,
right? It just didn't work out like it did in LA with Avery Bradley. Kelly Olynyk is a guy that's been around with the Miami Heat for a long time, Canadian guy. He'll get a chance to possibly start and put up maybe some decent numbers beside Christian Wood there. So I guess we'll see what happens in terms
unless the Houston Rockets trade Christian Wood in the offseason, which is I don't know what the hell they're doing anyways.
Right.
But one thing I want to say about Oladipo is, and this shouldn't go under the radar, he's in a contract year. So he's going to have to play himself into a new contract and play well.
Yeah.
So don't ever discount a guy who's in his last year of his contract, Norm Powell. Look what he did, right? New start. And by the way, going from Houston to Miami, your motivation also changes, right? How you see the game also changes. You're on a team that's previous to last week, lost 19, 20 in a row?
Yeah, they were
hard to get up for. Now you go for Eric Spoelstra with Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo and all those guys in South Beach. In South Beach, by the way, did I mention they're going to South Beach? I'm going to be motivated to play. You're in a playoff race. This team was in the finals last year, and you get to contribute. It's time for him to step up, get the bag next summer, but it starts the next game. Boom.
Yeah, I agree with you. And moving on, we got one last one, and I saved the best for last. We have Chicken Wing Lou Williams.
Yes.
Going to the Atlanta Hawks for Rajon Rondo. Magic City is going to be bumping with this news of this trade. I think it's going to be packed. I want to check out, I want to see Magic City's chicken wings and see if they've if their orders have just gone through the roof since this trade has been done. I was excited. I've been waiting to say that on the air. I tweeted it out earlier today. Chicken wing Lou Williams.
Yes, he did.
Right?
He
Chicken
did.
wing
Check
Lou,
it out. Retweet
right?
that shit.
Chicken wing Lou Will heading back home to the Atlanta Hawks, right into some bosoms.
Wow. You went there. Listen, I don't even know how to follow that up. Like, can we? No. Sure. Great deal for the certain businesses in Atlanta, right? He gets to go home and get an LD. I'll let you guys decide what that means. Everybody knows what that means. Stop this. Wow, chicken. I wish we had stock in chicken wings.
Right? Maybe we should look into
And
that.
the funny part is we started talking about the Orlando Magic, and we end up with Magic City.
Right, exactly.
So I guess this is a proper way to end trade deadline because it's time to dance, Lou.
Right. At least this time he won't get in trouble for going to Magic City, right?
I wonder if he chooses Stairway to Heaven as a song.
Hey, you never know. I mean, there was another part to that trade, right? Rajon Rondo did go to the LA.
Oh, yeah, that part.
Right, there was that play. I think, just to end it, before we end off the whole thing, and we don't talk about Lou Williams and chicken wings and Magic City or any of that anymore, or bosoms, whatever, it was a good deal for the LA Clippers, right? It adds, playoff Rondo is a thing. It's an absolute thing.
It's a thing, yeah,
right?
It's a smart deal. This is
right?
a smart deal.
It's a good deal. When the regular season doesn't really mean anything to Rajon Rondo. When he gets to the playoffs, he raises that level, that intensity, that drive. He raises that up a notch.
Very good point. That's a very good point, and that's what the Clippers, the other LA team, was missing last year, right? And it's a guy that can just get in your face and say, "Hey, wrap it up. I've been here before. It's time to go." Lou Williams, great shooter, off the bench, 6th guy of the year multiple times, et cetera, but he's one-dimensional. Right, those guys are now in the NBA, with all due respect, are a dime a dozen. You can get a lot of those guys now, right? A guy who's going to play with a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who has to bring that intensity. Now Kawhi can just sort of chill back, do this Kawhi things, right?
Dead on.
Paul George can stay in his lane because Rondo will get in his face if need to, right? And everybody's accountable. You bring a guy who's accountable, and that's what they were missing last year. We shit a lot on the Clippers last year. We did, and rightfully so. But Rondo has a track record, and you said they don't call him playoff Rondo because it's a catchphrase and he had T-shirts. No, the guy can bring it in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Forget the stats. He's not going to give you 40 and 10 and all that nonsense. He's going to lead by example. He's going to navigate. That he's going to be a captain. That's what it is. I always use the hockey analogy. If there was a team captain in basketball, he would be one of those guys that always has a C on his chest. This is a very smart move. Does it put him over the top? We will see. And he also has intel on the Lakers, by the way. Wink, wink. Right? That's one of those Belichick moves, right? Where you get a guy who played with your division rival so you can sort of know what's going on. I honestly do believe that actually happens. Well, and about time the Clippers, they needed to fill that need, right? Mm-hmm. They needed somebody on that on the one spot, so makes sense.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with you on that. I think it takes the ball out of Kawhi and Paul George's hands so much. Like they've been doing a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
the heavy lifting in terms of carrying the ball up, so it puts the ball in Rajon Rondo's hands. Yeah. It allows Kawhi and Paul George to kind of do their own thing, play their own game, do what they need to do, right? Yeah. Kind of like what Kawhi had here with Toronto, where Kyle Lowry was here, Fred VanVleet was here, right?
Bingo.
Right. It gives him space to do what Kawhi Leonard does best.
Yep.
And that's not obviously he's the focal point of the offense, but be the guy that we all know what Kawhi Leonard is known for, right? Don't get me wrong, he's having a great season this year, but there's a lot of pressure put on him because they expect him to win. He's in the final year of a contract where he could pick up his player option, where we all know he's going to decline that player option, but right, it opens it up. Paul George is there, same thing with him. We called him Pandemic P in the playoffs last year. He struggled last year in the bubble, but he's been playing well this year, playing exceptionally well this year. But it allows him to just be the Paul George of old, right? I think it's a great move. It's a move that the Clippers needed to make because they couldn't go into the playoffs being the same Clippers team they were last year. Yes, they added Serge Ibaka, but Serge Ibaka isn't Montrezl Harrell. It's not Montrezl Harrell, right? I think they added a couple other pieces, but they haven't panned out. They haven't worked as well. They gave money to the Morris twin there, and he's not.
No comment.
Right? Exactly. He's not the greatest player in the world, right? They gave him $64 million. But it's a great trade. They needed to make this trade after Denver went out and did what they did with Aaron Gordon, JaVale McGee, right? They needed to make a move to sort of help them when it comes to the playoff time. And you added arguably one of the best playoff point guards in the NBA, who's got 2 championships to his name. He's got pedigree. I think it's a great addition for the Clippers.
Yeah, I can't wait if it happens now, LA versus LA. Like if AD and LeBron can come back healthy.
Yeah.
Rondo, Kawhi, Paul George, AD, right? LeBron James and whoever else. I think I don't think the Lakers are done. It's going to be something. But the Denver Nuggets are going to have a lot to say. The Utah Jazz are going to have a lot to say. And the team that you're wearing right now and the jersey behind you, I think they're going to have a lot to say. So now the rosters are set. There's one more chapter to this buyout market coming up. And then everybody has to buckle up, get ready, because it's going to get nasty.
Yeah, definitely. I can't wait for the playoffs, especially now that the deadline's over. We know nobody's moving. There's nothing else to go that needs to go on. But, shout out to Magic City and Chicken Wing Lou Will. I think they won the trade deadline this year. Right, but we'll end it off on that note. The chicken wings and the
Stairway to Heaven.
Right, exactly. But
November Rain, by the way.
If you're watching this video, you're watching our podcast here, and you're on YouTube. All you got to do, just click that little.
We know you're on YouTube,
right? You're on YouTube, so just click that subscribe button below. Click the little bell so you get notifications when our new episodes come out, right? And then you could follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our podcast on Apple, on Spotify, on Amazon Music. You'll find us everywhere and anywhere, right?
That's right.
So,
and maybe we'll tag in Magic City.
Right, exactly. We might. We might just do that. We might just do that.
Might get a virus.
Right. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Basketball Lab Podcast. Thanks for joining us this week on the Basketball Lab Podcast. Make sure to follow us on our social media. You could follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the B-Ball Lab. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Basketball Lab Podcast, and you could also find us on iTunes, Spotify, and Amazon Music.